सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ। हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ, हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ, हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ। विदेशीका दलालहरू मुर्दाबाद, विदेशीका दलालहरू मुर्दाबाद। Go back MCC, go back MCC। सार्वभौम सत्ताको रक्षा गरौँ, सार्वभौम सत्ताको रक्षा गरौँ, सार्वभौम सत्ताको रक्षा गरौँ, सार्वभौम सत्ताको रक्षा गरौँ। सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, साम्राज्यवादीका दलालहरू मुर्दाबाद, साम्राज्यवादीका एजेन्टहरू मुर्दाबाद। देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशप्रेमीहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशप्रेमीहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशप्रेमीहरू एक हौ। Go back MCC, go back MCC, go back MCC, go back MCC। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद। हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ, हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ। विदेशीका एजेन्टहरू मुर्दाबाद, सम्पूर्ण देशप्रेमीहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशप्रेमीहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण राष्ट्रवादीहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ। Go back MCC, 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 go back MCC। सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ। Go back MCC, go back MCC, go back MCC। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादका एजेन्टहरू मुर्दाबाद, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ, सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू एक हौ। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादका विरुद्धमा हामी सम्पूर्ण देशभक्तहरू आज एकताबद्ध भएका छौँ, हामी कटिबद्ध भएका छौँ। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादका विरुद्धमा हामी मर्न तयार छौँ, तर अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादका अगाडि हामीले खुला टेक्दैनौँ। अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, हाम्रो आन्दोलन जारी छ। Go back MCC। तर हामी अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादलाई चेतावनी दिन चाहन्छौँ, हामी सडकमा गोली खान तयार छौँ, तर अमेरिकी साम्राज्यवादका अगाडि हामी आत्मसमर्पण गर्दैनौँ। म पुलिस प्रशासनका साथीहरूलाई म ध्यान आकर्षण गर्न चाहन्छु, देशभक्त साथीहरूलाई धरपकड गरियो भने, देशभक्त साथीहरूलाई तपाईँको ठेल्ने काम गरियो भने यो देशमा अर्को राष्ट्रवादी देशभक्त आन्दोलन सुरु हुनेछ। हस्त धन्यवाद। Go back MCC, go back MCC।
आदरणीय आन्दोलनकारी साथीहरू, हामी केही दिनदेखि आन्दोलनको मोर्चामा छौँ। हामी मात्रै होइन, आज सिंह नेपाल एक राष्ट्रवादी संघर्षका विरुद्ध सिंह नेपाल जातीय हामीले भनिरहेका छौँ। खास गरी प्रधानमन्त्री श्री बहादुर देउवालाई हामीले भनिरहेका छौँ। आन्दोलनकारी साथीहरू, तपाईँहरू त्यहाँ प्रहरी अनुसार धरपकड नगर्नु होला। हामी कोर्ट सभा गर्न लागेका छौँ। म सबै साथीहरूलाई समाजले यो कोर्ट सभामा सहभागी हुनको लागि अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छु। आन्दोलनकारी साथीहरू कृपया तपाईँ समन्वित हुनुहोला। हामी यो कोड सभा गर्न गइरहेका छौँ। म सबै साथीहरूलाई यो मञ्चको अगाडिपट्टि आएर बसेर अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छु।
You're counting down the seconds until you can skip the ad, right? I get it. But what if you never had to watch an ad again? What if you had a browser that actually respected your privacy? Well, Brave Browser does. And you can import your bookmarks too. Download Brave today and see what all the hype's about. It's free.
We organize election, and we are again few years down the road into the square one.
بالحديث عن التغيير يطرح سؤال.
Mentioning the change, there's a question regarding the achievements of the current authorities in Mali. Some European leaders say that Mali is about to make some political losses. What do you think, Mr. Meneses, and what are your achievements?
The first element is we are more asserting the sovereignty of Mali and the capacity of its government and its people to devise its own policies. We have seen in the past it's more about foreign powers, international community making decisions for Malians. So for this time, Malians want to be the owner of their own destiny. They want to make those decisions in the sovereign manner as a sovereign state. The second element is on the security front. If you're asking what these authorities have achieved, in the past 7 months, we have invested more in the military capacities of the country more than in the past 15 years. Now we are seeing the result. In Mali, for instance, for the past 2-3 months, more than 1,000 terrorists has been neutralized. For the past 3-4 weeks, we brought back to their homes more than 15,000 the internally displaced people. So if we have more opportunity, we have to make sure that the state authorities are returning back, that people are going back to their homes, then we can create more conditions to have elections to take place. If I just take the security element, but I think what is more important really to assert the sovereignty of the country, which has been denied, to hear the voices of our young children and people who are on the street demonstrating that Mali's voice and ability to devise its own policy should be respected.
On the other hand, there's a sort of a lost trust with some African institutions and with the international community. They say that you did not fulfill your pledges, like when you say you will hand the power to civilians after 18 months, but this did not happen. There will be no elections, as said before, on February 28th either. That's why they say you are just buying time when it comes to fulfilling your pledges, because either you or the military coup want to stay.
My response is not to say the military wants really to stay in power just to enjoy the power. The commitment of my country to return to the constitutional order and the commitment of President Goita have not changed. What we have missed is the deadline to realize it. Yes, it's true that we have a bid with the international community and ECOWAS to have an 18-month transition, but you know, it's not just a quiet river, a transition. Unexpected events have occurred. We have completely changed because down the road, 10 months after the beginning of the transition period, we have significant clashes and dysfunctionality at the head of the state between the prime minister, the civilian prime minister, and the civilian president and the vice president, who is a military, and this has led, because of also of the foreign interference, to try to marginalize the role of the military in the transition, it could have led to military confrontation in the country. It has been avoided. So this is where we had what people call a second coup, which also is like we are going from to square one to initiate the transition process once again. This has been a major event which have certainly delayed the process. The second is the French Barkhane operation, which has been operating in the north, which have decided in May to stop the operation. This definitely have completely changed the plans of the government in terms of providing security throughout the country. I'm not talking about the demonstration of the of the unions throughout the country, which have also paralyzed the country.
هي هذه نقطة خلافية مع الإكواس. الإكواس يقول
There is a point of difference with ECOWAS, which say let's do the elections and the elected government will apply the reforms. It seems you want more additional 5 years to do the reforms and the elections. ECOWAS want way less time, way less than 5 years. The African Union Peace and Security Council proposed a period of 16 months for this to be done. Will you accept a maximum period of 16 months for you and for a transitional new period? What is your situation regarding this matter?
All options are at this moment on the table. Yes, after the national dialogue, people have proposed that the transition should be, the duration of the transition should be between six months to 5 years. Of course, the majority of the delegates have requested 5 years. This is what the government have submitted to ECOWAS, but to say this is a basis for negotiation to come up to a more appropriate and reasonable timeline. Mali is not an ordinary and a normal country. It's a country which has been going since 2012 into a multi-dimensional crisis. This is one of the reasons we have a 13,000 footprint UN mission in the country. We have the French Operation Barkhane with about 5,000 troops. We have the G5 Sahel troops. We have the Malian troops themselves. We have the Europeans. With all this involvement, we have not been able to be successful in providing security. It means that the situation in Mali is very complex. So we have to understand we are not trying to only organize an election in the country. We are trying to fix a problem undergoing a multifaceted crisis, security crisis, economic crisis, social crisis. So where we think there is a problem, I don't think our partners and sometimes our neighbors in the region sometimes have taken the time to listen to Malians, to understand that we have a big problem, and for that problem to be resolved, we need to look at the root causes, we need to look at the governance issues, we need to look at how to refound, because that's one of the process. We say we need a refoundation of the state. We think with the dialogue we are having with the partners, there could be a more robust monitoring mechanism, more than we did previously. Whatever timeline would be agreed, we prefer to have maybe an independent or Malian-led with the involvement of the partners to have a mechanism to ensure trust with the partners and to make sure that not only us, because we have responsibility, but the international community also will have responsibility to make sure whatever is agreed also, they are also fulfilling their pledges to Mali.
Expansion of the French ambassador is something unprecedented when it comes to dealing between the Francophone countries and France. Paris considered this matter something unjustified, and this will be having bad consequences on the relations between the two countries, according to the French Foreign Ministry spokesperson. Why you reach that period of time, despite France being a strategic alliance? They are fighting terrorism, fighting with the Malian forces. Why you reach this point?
France is truly a strategic and important partner to Mali. But for Malian, what is more important is the respect to Mali, to the Malian dignity, and to the Malian sovereignty. We have increasingly seen the French authorities since the coup that happened in Mali, that they have been taking stance to Mali, which have been offensive and disrespectful in their public pronouncement, including from the French president. And who is the French foreign minister to decide about the legitimacy of the Malian government? This is up to the Malians, not up to them. Everything is not about the amount that a partner is bringing at the table. If this partner is doing in a way that is patronizing, is not respectful to the Malian people and to their sovereignty. We want different type of partnership, and we want different type of engagement. Can you believe for a sovereign country we have areas in Mali where our Air Force is not allowed to fly in because the French are operating in those areas? This is our country. We should be the one to authorize anyone to fly over the Malian territory. So this is, among others, the reason that we have requested to review all the elements in these defense agreements to ensure that our sovereignty is respected, while it gives us more room to cooperate with the partner. And this will not stop only with France. We are reviewing many of the agreements with partners where we think the Malian sovereignty and the rights are not really well reflected in these documents. What is important for us is Mali is willing to cooperate with all partners, Europeans, US, and other partners, specifically in the security fields. But we want any relationship with our partners to be based on the sincerity, the respect of our sovereignty, and the respect of the unity of our country. If I give you one example, which is the case of the Danish troop that we have requested to leave as part of the Takuba operation, we think the sovereignty of Mali was not respected because we had about 3 steps. The first step was an agreement we have with France in about 2014 on the defense. And then there was also an exchange of letter which allowed French to invite third parties to join. And the third leg is to ensure that whatever partner is coming, there is an annex document to this exchange of letter which require formal agreement between the country that are coming and the Malian government. These steps have not been fulfilled, and we thought that we couldn't have this presence to come in.
America and France in particular, say that there are forces from the mercenaries in Mali now, and they are supporting the transitional authority. Mr. Minister, do you think there's Wagner forces on the territories of Mali?
Mali has nothing to do with Wagner, and we made a public statement on this matter. And in November, I was in Moscow. I made also a public statement near my friend and colleague, Minister Sergei Lavrov, with whom we all concur that the cooperation between Mali and Russia is a state-to-state cooperation. For us, this issue of Wagner is like a kind of smear campaign to mobilize the international community against Mali. Mali, President Goïta and the Prime Minister, we don't need any mercenary to protect the Malian authorities. I refer you to the statement that was issued, I don't know if it's in December or January, by the Malian government. A few days later, we had a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry, which admitted that the collaboration with Russia is done through the state channels. So I refer you to that one, and I refer you also to the statement made by Mr. Lavrov himself in November. But I know this is mainly because of some of the objectives of France and others, because we understand we are in the geopolitical adversarial confrontation between big powers. Mali does not want to be involved in that, because for Mali, we want to diversify our partnership. We want to maintain our position to be able to work with all partners, be it Chinese, Americans, Russian, or Europeans. So we want to maintain that long-standing principal position of the Malian diplomacy. We think that the big powers have the ability to resolve their own differences. Mali does not want to be at the footstep of the elephants when they are fighting among themselves.
Developments with France and reconsidering the defense agreement, do you think this will affect your country in the face of terrorism, as you name it, and the organizations facing the government in Mali? What is your optimum point of view regarding this matter?
We have three different layers when we talk about the security. The first should be how and what should we do to empower the Malian security and defense forces, to give them the ammunition, the capability and the capacities to protect and defend the country. The second is what type of mechanism we can put at the regional level, working with our neighbors, like is the case in the G5 Sahel, to ensure that there is collaboration, because this is a transnational threat. No single country will have the ability to solve this on its own. This is the second layer. And the third one is what our partners can bring in. Like we have the manpower in many of our countries to wage this war. What is lacking sometimes is the technology, is the financial resources.
Regarding the military and armed organizations that are with a jihadi background in Mali, the government said that the government is ready to negotiate with those who are affiliates to ISIS or Nusrat al-Islam or Al-Qaeda. What do you think about this project or this matter, and what are you going to negotiate about?
You know, in Mali, we had a national conference in 2017. One of the main recommendations of the conference was to, even though we had one also in 2019 as well, both have recommended that for the reconciliation and lasting peace in Mali, there is a need to also discuss with some of the radical groups. Now, the point, and those who are Malians, because we have foreign fighters, but those who are Malians, because sometimes we have many of our young people in the communities who are under the influence of those groups. You have two choices in this case. Either you decide that my option is only military, and I have the ability to defeat them militarily, and I have no space for compromise, or you understand that military will still continue to be a main element of our policy, but at the same time, let us give ourselves also a political space where we can bring back many of our young people who have gone through this sometimes for economic reasons, for many other reasons, to take them back to ensure that we have a national reconciliation in the country. Now, what is not clear, we did not devise a specific blueprint on how this dialogue will be made. It's a principled position, and I think we should try as much as possible to talk to Malians to find a lasting political solution. But even this negotiation cannot be done in the vacuum. We have a constitution. So when we start talking, we need to ensure that we are discussing in the framework of a constitution. Mali constitution, for instance, said Mali is a secular state. So whatever is being discussed, it should be done in line with this nature of Malian constitution.
In case the real partners decide to stop it, to help the army of Mali to face the organizations, who will be there? Russia, for example?
In any case, Mali has the responsibility to find solution to provide security to Malians. We know we cannot do this alone, but we will not accept any sort of support if we think this support or that support will not help us to provide security to Malians. If you are coming as a partner to do what we should be doing at our place, and that tomorrow when you are leaving, we are left with nothing, we don't think this is the type of partnership we are looking at.
As a result of the coup d'etat, Mr. Minister, the ECOWAS decisions represent a siege on Mali and some sanctions from the West against the so-called leaders of the coup in Mali. What are your economic options regarding this matter?
For us, sanctions are never the solution. We oppose sanctions. And we think if sanctions were to be effective, when they impose these illegal, illegitimate, and unfair sanctions on Mali, including closing the borders of a landlocked country, which is also an inhumane action. But beside that, if the sanction were to be effective, 2 or 3 weeks after Mali being sanctioned, we will not have been recorded a coup in Burkina Faso. It could have been dissuasive enough so that that will not happen. We think if we don't, as I said in the beginning, address the root causes that leads to the coups, will always be wrong.
متى أنت كمسؤول مدني متى تعطي
When you as a civilian official, when the authority will go to civilians because the chairman of the Military Council in Mali is trying to consolidate his powers through some matters that he asked for and requested, including, for example, cancelling the transitional vice president. Do you think this means he wants to be in power more time?
No, I don't think so. If you ask me today to tell you when we'll hold election, I don't have the answer to that because this is specifically part of the discussion we are having with ECOWAS, UN, AU, and other partners to come to a compromise. Specifically looking at the changes that have been proposed for the transition charter, I don't think this is the way for President Goïta to increase his power, because when you look at the beginning of the transition, we had 18 months transition, and with ECOWAS, they struck a deal that the president should be civilian and the military should hold the vice presidency. And in this vice presidency, his prerogative was to specifically focus on defense and security matters. Now that he is himself the president, there is no need to have a vice president in charge of the defense and security, while we have also a defense and security minister.
Mr. Abdullah Joub, the foreign minister, thank you very much for being with us here at Al Jazeera.
Thank you. Shukran.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
Once city dwellers, now posted to remote villages in Morocco. Al Jazeera World follows the personal journeys of 3 women teachers, their daily struggles with isolation and battles with physical hardship, sacrificing their family lives for the education of future generations. Women in the Wind on Al Jazeera.
Street fighting in Kharkiv after Russian troops enter Ukraine's second biggest city. Hello and welcome, I'm Peter Dobby. You're watching Al Jazeera with our continuing coverage of the conflict in Ukraine. Also ahead this half hour, Russian forces attack oil and gas facilities, sparking huge explosions in several Ukrainian cities. The Ukrainian leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, says his country is ready for talks with Russia, but not in Belarus.
We will stop Putin from using his war chest.
Western allies agree to cut some Russian banks from the international messaging and payment system that's called SWIFT. Day 4. Russia has stepped up its military advance as its troops enter Ukraine's second biggest city. Kharkiv is situated in the northeast, near the separatist-held regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, more than 400 kilometers from the capital, Kiev. Military vehicles have been seen moving along streets in Kharkiv city center. The regional governor says Ukrainian forces are battling Russian troops in the streets and warns civilians not to go out. Russian forces have attacked oil and gas facilities, sparking huge explosions. Troops are trying to take over the Vasilkiv airbase. That's 40 kilometers southwest of Kiev. An oil depot there is on fire after being hit by a Russian missile. Ukraine has rejected the Russian offer of talks in Belarus, in Minsk, saying it was the staging ground for the invasion. A Russian delegation has arrived in the Belarusian city of Gomel. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says he remains open to talks in a neutral venue.
If you didn't have these aggressive actions from your territory, we could have talked in Minsk, in your town. This is the truth. That's the situation to talk between neighbors. And now you have made your choice. It depends on you. That's why now we are saying no to Minsk. Other places could be a springboard for talks. We want to talk. We want to meet to end this war. Bratislava, Budapest, we have suggested to the Russians, or any other place we accept.
Okay, let's get going and stay with that big story for you. Joining us here on set is Matt Dimick. He is formerly the head of Russia and East Europe at the US National Security Council. Matt Dimick, welcome to Al Jazeera English. Let's talk specifics. What's your reading of where we are with the broader conflict?
It's been a remarkable set of circumstances here over the past 4 days, as I think everybody's been able to see. It's very apparent that when Russia laid out their strategy and their plan and executed their operational plan, they were expecting to be much farther along at this point. And due to the bravery and the grit and the determination of the Ukrainian military forces and the Ukrainian people, that plan has stumbled straight out of the gate. So my reading so far is that the Russians have clearly shown their hand. They've shown exactly what their operational plan is, at least at this initial stage. They're certainly looking to capture the capital. They were hoping to do that within the first day or two, which was repelled. And now they're having to scramble to try to figure out an alternate plan. So that looks like that axis is stalled for the moment. Of course, they've got 3 other axes coming from the Kharkiv axis, the Donbass axis, and the Crimea axis. Mixed success on a variety of those fronts. It certainly appears that from the Kharkiv axis and the Crimea axis, they're trying to form a pincer movement so that they can envelop what is probably Ukraine's most valuable and most effective fighting forces, which are farther in the east. Russia's had attempted to conduct that envelopment. If they're successful, they could probably prevent those forces from working against Russian forces later on.
The Russian forces vastly outnumber the Ukrainian forces, but for you, what's the USP about the Ukrainian forces? Is it just they want to defend their land?
Absolutely. These are tough customers. Ukrainian military is not without resources. They are not without capabilities. They certainly have gotten stronger even since 2014, thanks to a pretty robust train and equip program, plus the Ukrainian interest in reforming their military and getting stronger. So I think we've been very impressed with the Ukrainian military. There was confidence that they would be able to hold up to a certain extent, albeit they're outnumbered vastly by superior Russian forces. There's certainly the concept that the Ukrainians would be able to hold up to a certain extent. But at this point, I would have to say the Ukrainian military, vastly overperforming from what we expected. They're able to continue to have their air defense operational, even despite Russia's vast amount of air power that should have cleared the skies of Ukrainian Air Force and Ukrainian air defense. That hasn't happened, which speaks well to Ukrainians' capabilities.
Have the Russians pivoted towards what's going on in the east, particularly now they've been going after Mariupol, they haven't managed it. It looked as if they were trying to build some sort of rump enlarged buffer zone, sort of Donetsk big, Donetsk 2, almost extending it towards the west or the southwest towards Crimea. And yet there are people who do a similar job to yourself, who say that those conduit lines from the Belarusian border down to Kiev are literally now perhaps too long and overstretched. So if you've got the guys in the Russian tanks at the head of those columns, they need to be supplied constantly with new bullets, everything to keep the machine going, new bullets, new missiles. And if the Ukrainians manage to break those corridors, at that point, the Russian forces that have got from, say, midday to 9 p.m. on the clock face of Kiev city center, they will be left isolated and therefore very, very vulnerable.
In modern combat, when it comes to conventional ground forces, armored columns and long, vast columns of vehicles consume fuel and ammunition at an absolute ferocious rate. And if you have not stockpiled enough of the logistics ahead of time, and if you have not planned for an operation to take longer than expected, which is currently the case that we're seeing now, then you're going to have convoys and vehicles that just run out of gas, they run out of ammunition, and they are basically stranded along the side of the road until the logisticians can reorganize and get equipment and supplies back to the frontline forces. Puts the lead elements of all of these Russian forces at the tip of these axes at incredible risk. And those supply lines that stretch back now dozens of kilometers are at risk of smaller Ukrainian units who can easily attack on the flanks. They can hit and strike at points of their choosing and extract a lot of damage against many of these axes, which I think we're seeing play out. And it's a shock, I believe, to the Russian military after these 2 or 3 days where they were expecting, I imagine, to be much farther along than they are and to achieve much more success. I think they're reeling at this point, trying to figure out what went wrong and how to address it.
Do you get the sense that as far as Mr. Zelensky was concerned, over the past 4 months of the Russian military buildup on the other side of eastern Ukraine, or the border between eastern Ukraine and Russia and between northern Ukraine and Belarus, that there was a kind of a diplomatic sleight of hand almost going on his part, because he was saying and signaling clearly, guys, let's just keep on talking. Diplomacy is never dead. It might be ice cold, but it's never dead, never dead. And yet, as Russia was saying, we're building up our forces, and the West was kind of sticking its head in the sand on that one, kind of, because the West was, yeah. Maybe Mr. Zelensky was saying, actually, guys, to his military planners, we need to get ready because we cannot, at least we cannot trust Mr. Putin. At most, he might go for a full-on invasion.
I think we'd have to dial it back a little bit, back to October and November, where the United States had some, seems like some pretty clear intelligence about what was going on. And as it's playing out now, it was almost 100% accurate about the timing, the size, and the direction that some of these operations were going to go. So I don't believe there was any surprise on the part of Western countries when it came to what to expect. I know Mr. President Zelensky had his own reasons for trying to calm the nerves of the Ukrainian people and try to play or try to speak to the scenario as being something of not really expecting an invasion for his own purposes. He didn't want to see capital fleeing from the country. He did not want to instill panic. I think there was a sense in the United States, for sure, and probably in other Western countries that were privy to the intelligence about what was coming Mr. Zelensky's way, that he maybe should have been a little bit more nervous about the Russian advance and the Russian buildup, and maybe there were probably some opportunities maybe to prepare, entrench, put some defenses in, reinforce border guards up around those regions where the Russian forces were. He had a lot of reasons to play that down, but I don't think there was any mistake about what Russia was doing, what their capabilities were, how they were marshaling, and the timing of what they were going to do.
The direction of travel of conflicts like this, particularly when, if you accept that we are in stage 1 here of something that may yet end up being long, messy, literally with a big death toll, perhaps, can turn in the blink of an eye very, very quickly. How exposed is Kharkiv? How vulnerable is that place? Because it's only 40 kilometers from the Russian border.
It's very exposed. It's very close to one of the centers of gravity for Russian military forces. So if Russia puts its mind to it, they have enormous amounts of materiel and people that can surround Kharkiv and isolate it. Going into the city of Kharkiv, one of Ukraine's biggest cities, presents all the same problems of urban warfare that Russians are experiencing in Kiev at the moment. So in the sense that Kharkiv is isolated and close to Russia and surrounded by an enormous amount of Russian force, yes, but the forces inside Kharkiv have got tremendous assets at their ability, and it presents the Russians with a uniquely complex problem of trying to root out Ukrainian forces and fight the citizens hand to hand inside that city. So it's a mixed bag.
Whether it's the Turkish president, Mr. Erdogan, 15 hours ago now, dropping hints about access to the ocean, to the Black Sea via the Bosphorus, whether it's Boris Johnson doing big sound bites standing in front of military aircraft, whether it's Mr. Biden coming to the lectern inside the White House, everyone is clearly now on the same page, deploying their individual bits of strategy from a portfolio of resources that they think they can bring to it. Is there a calculation, though? The calculation is we will give the Ukrainians as much support as we possibly can, up to, but not including, US, EU, NATO boots on the ground inside Ukraine or Russia, until perhaps the popularity of what Mr. Putin is doing begins to dip massively if and when we see Russian body bags going back to Russia.
Yeah, you put your finger on all the aspects of it. Been pleasantly surprised by the amount of global support for Ukraine and just the amount of resolve, and all, like as you said, all these leaders are coming out and making decisions that we had not expected even a week ago. You see Germany now approving the deployment of Stinger missiles, which they were nowhere close to contemplating just a week ago. So Russia's actions have galvanized the rest of the world. It's really changed the tenor and tone of how all of our Western countries think about Russia. I think the blinders are off, if there were any to begin with, for countries that were somewhat sympathetic to Russia's cause or were looking for any reason to not put the screws to Russia. All those excuses have been blown away by Russia's invasion into Ukraine. So.
Okay. Diplomacy is not completely dead. Diplomacy, I guess, is never dead. It's ice cold, though. It's kind of on the slab, but there's still a pulse in there someplace. What do you make of the refreshed offer just in the past, hour and a half or so of talks? Russia saying, we are ready to talk. Oh, by the way, it's got to be in Minsk. Minsk didn't work the first time round. Minsk 2, demonstrably, as we're seeing live hour to hour now, Minsk 2 failed. Astana, arguably, Mr.
त्यसरी नै हामीले कुनै पनि देशले आफ्नो सामाजिक व्यवस्था छनौट गर्ने उसको हकको कुरा हो। हामीले 62-63 को जनक्रान्तिपछि 10 वर्ष लगाएर संविधान बनायौं। सभामुख महोदय, यो संविधान अन्तर्गत हामीले हाम्रो भविष्य अब समाजवादतर्फ जानुपर्छ भनेर हामीले चुनेका छौं। हाम्रो भविष्य निर्णय गर्ने सम्पूर्ण नेपाली जनताको हकको कुरा हो। यो अरु कुनै देशले